You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm SavageMick.
And I am Scarr, your hated rival.
How I hate you so much. All the time you're thwarting me. Someday I'll show you up and I will be declared the best baker? Yeah. Cake maker. Ha!
My souffles will destroy you. But yes.
I don't know enough baking. I'm a simple man, simple pleasures. I just like a nice iced bun. None of this fancy stuff from my ostentatious rival.
Blood cakes. But yes. We're here today to talk about rivals and other, not necessarily enemies, but definitely not friendlies that your party of adventuring ne'er-do-wells will meet in the course of our adventures.
So rival parties that are kind of operating in the same sphere as your players, but not necessarily... they're not mortal enemies, right? There's plenty of those to fight already.
Yeah.
Okay.
These aren't people who necessarily oppose the party. They want to be the ones to show up the party, to be better than your group. They want to get to the treasure first. They want to be the ones to have the dragon mounted on the wall. They want to be the ones to marry the princess or negotiate with the baron or what have you before the players do.
They want to be one step ahead, thwarting your party. And we can probably talk about the other version, which are the Dark Mirror, but we'll get to that, folks. We'll get to that. But why don't we just kill them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, particularly if you're in your generic, points of light, lawless frontier. It's Deadstone with long swords. Not Deadstone. Deadpool? Deadwood?
Deadwood.
Tombstone.
Right.
Tombstone.
Pick your Western.
Yeah. Let's just put it out there, if you want to have a long-running, rival group in your thing, you should probably be in a context where, killing them and throwing the bodies into a ditch is not the obvious go-to solution to your rival adventuring problems. So, if you are in that sort of grim and gritty, life is cheap sort of situation, then...
Do you want to use the word milieu?
Let's see. We have enough of that with the Tom Gygax episodes.
No crossing the streams. Imagine if there's been rival Ghostbusters.
I feel like there was an episode or 3 of rival Ghostbusters.
But that's kind of where we're landing here. You might be allied against a common threat, ghosts in this case, cowboy ghosts, let's say, and you're competing in some sense. You have this rival party you have to compete with, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're on the same side, right? Roughly, yes.
Roughly, there certainly should be some form of social context where, it's not a go-to to just beat them and slit their throats, throw the bodies in the ditch. That shouldn't be the go-to, because then you just have sort of an enemy with extra steps.
Say no to murder hobo.
Yeah. Like if you're in a murder hobo campaign where the players, and to be fair, like if the players look kind to wander around aimlessly with no home base, there's not going to be much bed. It's going to, if you have a rival party in that context, it's going to feel weird, like that they're being stalked by this group of ne'er-do-wells who really, really want to know that they are getting slightly better deals on their goblin slaying duties.
I feel like there's got to be a couple of anime tropes around this.
Yeah.
It's the place you kind of see it arrive most often, but there's no reason not to have it in your game. Indiana Jones had a famous rival as well. His name escapes me now. Belloc, yeah.
Yeah,
something
but like Belloc was this the thing where, like, Indiana was generally in a... Well, actually, going into the sort of morality of, when Indiana gets to shoot people, when he doesn't, is maybe...
Treasure hunting, not robbing the indigenous.
Yeah.
Okay, leaving that aside, yeah, and Belloc might not be a great example, but yeah, there has to be some, as you say, some framework within which you're working where you can outdo each other without necessarily coming to fatal blows. But of course, your players are the heroes. They're probably on the side of right and good. The other guys, well, they're on your side, but their methods are suspect. They're braggadocious, of course. They sneer, and they might not do to others. They might not deal with outside parties with the same even-handedness that your players do. So they're sort of morally suspect. This is the trope. But well worth considering when you're trying to fold a rival party into your game.
Well, presumably you're putting this rival party in your game because you want to evoke a particular feeling. Now you could have the, they are you, but, slightly less pleasant and even worse to NPCs. But you could do other angles on it. One that springs to mind is the entitled rich kids, who, they're not, worse behaved, but they're very clearly here because Daddy bought them a +3 sword and, a bunch of retainers, and now they think they're big heroes too. And they never, bootstrapping.
They don't have to try as hard for their successes as you do, which is surely going to stick in your player's craw at some point.
Yeah.
That's a really good example. There's the ruthless professionals. They're doing the same job as you, but they tend to cut corners or
throats.
Maybe throats, yeah, or they have a less pleasant way of getting it done. Which, of course, if you throw that on the table, it's probably a really sneaky way of manipulating your players into being more virtuous overall, because they get to look down on their rivals. We did it better, we did it faster, and we did it without quite so many crispy orphans. So go us. There's nothing quite like a rival to bring out the best in people if done correctly.
Yeah, you presumably want, if you're putting this, dedicated NPC team into it, you clearly want them to evoke some aspect of the situation. Like, if they're in some sort of adventuring guild, you wanted to highlight how the guild empowers many groups to do different dungeons, but, has a big emphasis on treasure. So you can have the rival group sort of be the downside of the system, whereas the players represent the upside, or maybe vice versa if you're going for subversive or something. Or if it's a social context like that, they're from another country. But maybe you want to have this sort of rival nations element where your party members are, the knights of, country A, and there's country B is still there, and, there's no war going on, hint, hint. So you definitely can't just stab them and be done with it, because that would be against diplomatic relations. But there's definitely a rivalry going on here, and then you sort of create a system where the interplay between the two parties is representative of the wider conflict. And I think that's sort of where you want to be going with this sort of rival party things. You want it's meant to sort of actualize a sort of theme or reality in your milieu that wouldn't be front and center, except that it has been sort of personified. So, yeah.
Understood, yeah. That's a really good point. You can use these rivals to put a face on what might otherwise be quite an abstract threat or another contender. And as you say, if those two hint nations went to hint war, then they could become actual adversaries at some point in the future. But how much more satisfying is that going to be for GMs and players alike when you're not facing off against some nameless guards captain, but your hated rival from peacetime, who you've got beef with them, and you presumably have some zingers to throw across the line when you do finally meet. So yeah, there's lots of good reasons to bring rivals into a game. I suppose if we're looking for non-lethal forms of rivalry, the Harry Potter kind of setup seems to introduce an awful lot of that. Academic success. Not sure exactly how you introduce that to role-playing games that aren't very specific. Although, of course, is there a D&D book about magic school?
Yeah, they just released Strixhaven a few months ago, and
that's right. So there's clearly some scope there. You're not going to get on with everybody on campus. Now, I feel like this works best, and I mentioned anime because it's a medium where they will often contort the entire world to make sense of setting up these kinds of rivalries.
Yeah, you'll have dungeons growing up out of the earth and elaborate systems of adventure guilds and
rankings for superheroes. Is it One Punch Man, I think, has that.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched One Punch Man, amazing. Are they ever going to make a second series?
I
not big on anime. Go watch One Punch Man. It's fantastically written, very funny. And this is for a guy, not an anime guy. Right. So, sports. I mean, if there is actually, here's an idea. Here's something to sort of throw in the mix. If you do happen to find yourself in a fantasy world where superpowers or something quite like them are commonplace, D&D, people are going to blow off steam, and adventures are probably no different. So there's no reason your rivals couldn't be in the local beer hockey league or whatever the equivalent is. Blood Bowl in the Games Workshop Warhammer world is a place where, in theory, I mean, I'm pretty sure Blood Bowl is sort of tongue-in-cheek canon to the Warhammer fantasy setting. But yeah, that's a place where you could face off against rivals of even different species. And maiming's allowed, but outright killing's rare enough.
You get a yellow card for it.
Yeah, they'll check almost everybody for chainsaws. So contriving some sort of Quidditch-like or fantasy football, quite literally, fantasy football aspect to your world might give you a place where your party can develop a rivalry, which has a points-based arbitration system, as they attempt to bake off or face off or dodgeball off against their opponents.
Yeah, I do think like that sort of develop. You want this sort of relationship to develop. This isn't unless you're having a very specific small point where yes, the first encounter, they're going to meet, they're going to notice their rivals, and then they're going to kill them. That's not really the same kind of thing as you build up this rivalry of over many sessions. So you need these sort of first off, they need to meet relatively often, and there needs to be a reason for them to meet relatively often. Like, this is where you get stuff like you have an adventurers guild where there's 4 or 5 different adventuring parties, and this is the one who have taken sort of umbrage with your group for whatever reason, and you still have to go back to the guild hall every month to pay your guild dues and get new quests and stuff, and this is where you get to eye each other across the room more often. Or, like, if you're in this sort of 2 wars context, well, presumably you have a thing where these adventure parties are going back and forth in similar courts where, the bar needs this done, bar needs that done, and, the other country has sent their guys to say, we shall help to prove that our nation is friends. Yeah, obviously there's going to be some dramatic contrivance involved, but if you put a little thought into it, it's
now if you want to contrive your drama to the absolute sticking point, then having established your rivals, what can be better than having them show up in your party's darkest moment to save them?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah,
How much grit are you going to get in your craw over that one?
Yeah, I think that's definitely. I think that's that. The cliche is the usual. The adventuring party goes into a dungeon, does all the work, comes out, and then they get sort of hornswoggled by the rival party who run off with the treasure. Whereas I think, that's if you really want to just twist the knife, I think it'd be better to, let the players get in over the head and have the other adventurers save them.
Yeah, of course, the payoff will come later on when the favour is returned and your players do it so much more graciously and better.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of fun to be had with that. What else can we use Rivals for? I suppose we can use Rivals to drive story. We can use them to present a soft obstacle. We can use them to maybe show players where the interests of the organization they're part of lie by having your rivals only partially succeed in something or having them inadvertently give away some advantage that your players can then capitalize on, be it a piece of information or a lead in an investigation. They're kind of useful as the less... They're going to always have to be... Ideally, they're always second fiddle to your players in some way, be it morally or in terms of ability. But they're also quite useful for feeding plot points. Because if it's a rival party, then maybe not everybody in the party sees things the same way, and one of them might let slip something to your players that they'll, being a much more cooperative and tightly cohesive bunch, will be able to use later on, or will put them on the path to their next adventure.
Yeah, like you'd have. That's what another advantage of a party is, that it is a multi-character thing, and thus can have multiple different perspectives, even if you have decided that they're all evil, and the evil mirrors the player. You could show different kinds of evil. You could have the weird psychotic halfling who's always playing with knives, but the cleric has got this big rambunctious spiel about how tyranny is the natural order of the universe, and putting people in camps just makes sense when you really go down to it. And these kinds of interactions.
Sorry, what organization are we part of? Are we the hands? Are we the bodies?
Well, again, maybe that's the point, is that you're showing, the different aspects of your adventuring coalition, or your two countries on the border, or what have you.
Things don't necessarily need to go to quite those extremes. There could be friendly rivalries. Yeah. And of course, you've got two parties essentially coming together and socializing sometimes and engaging with each other in different ways. What better place for a fledgling romance? One that will be entirely complicated, a real Romeo and Juliet affair. Like that's rich and fertile ground for all sorts of shenanigans outside of the dungeon or off the battlefield, where you can have. In fact, I think I ran something sort of similar. One of my players in the game took extreme exception, for entirely legitimate character reasons, to an NPC who was in fact involved with one of the other players, and they became, in a sense, rivals. So it is great fodder, even if it's only one character. So we started with rival parties, but of course you can generate different rivals for your different players, because what's better than it's somewhere between. It's a softer version of a nemesis, someone who you're competing with rather than outright looking to kill.
Yeah. And of course, it could take different forms. One thing is just like, if you don't want to have a dedicated or contrived party of adventurers of a thing, you can still have a faction or some group or organization. Like maybe it's the Wizards Guild or the Merchants Guild, or someone who keeps being an inconvenience to the players, but not necessarily sending a group of 4 to 6 level 5 adventurers out to do the same things as the adventurers do. But at the same point, you still want to personify such a thing like that. If you're having this faction, you definitely want them to be in a rival position. They should definitely be 1 to 3 personas of that thing that they can interact with. Someone who could just throw barbs across a barroom or a noble court to remind the players that there's a face to the antagonism.
Yes, I mean, the rivalry might never develop beyond the verbal interactions.
Or the increased price of venture gear, but yeah.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have to be operating in exactly the same arena, but they do have an input.
And of course, if you want to encourage players to interact with the arena, someone that they want to show up might be a good way. If you want to get them into the faction game, have 2 or 3 sides, let them interact with those sides, and then the ones that they hate, they will probably help aid the rivals of.
And you might be asking yourselves, listeners, like, well, why? Why are they rivals? Here's the simple answer. Some people just don't like each other. But they can't really do anything about it. I'm sure we've all gone to work and met someone who are like, man, I mean, we're all on ostensibly the same side here, but I do not like that guy. I'm never going to put a foot out of my way to help them. So yeah, those would, and once you vocalize that explicitly, then you've got a rival. I mentioned the Dark Mirror at the start of the episode. Now this crosses the line. So we go from a rival party to sort of an enemy party, but very specifically, I think in this case, an enemy party that is designed by the GM to reflect the players. And if you don't like contrivances, then stop here, because you're going to have to engage in even more contrivances to ensure that the first time these two dust off isn't the last time. There's going to have to be some way to get your rivals, either by being way more powerful, which is tricky. Just beating up on players is not a good evening's entertainment. But finding a way for them to be on par, an obvious threat, and a mirror to your party, it is contrived after all, is if you can bring them back a couple of times, if they're recurring, then I think they qualify as rivals with obviously a bit of a keener edge.
I mean, yeah, there are a few. Yeah, it's going to be contrived somewhat, because it is entirely a dramatic conceit. The idea of the mirror that you can hold up to the party to show how they are different, or that they are the same, or what have you. So if you're going this fully into the trope, then you are explicitly using the laws of drama over the laws of simulation.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to worry about there. The players at your table, turns out they are actually the centre of the universe.
Yeah.
One way or another. Or at least they sit at the heart of the panopticon. They see all. And of course they're witnessed by everybody. So what else can we do with rivals in this context?
Well,
there's inter-party rivalry, of course.
Oh yeah, well that's sort of a eternal thing. That's not really something a GM can start unless he's being very weird or using an awful lot of doppelgangers. Now that's sort of a spontaneous player thing, and some people love that, and some people get really weirded out where there's this sort of inter-party beef going on. So that's more of a thing you have to manage as a party management thing. It's just like, is everyone okay with that? Like, is everyone okay with the fighter and the paladin trading barbs continuously, or is that going to upset some other players? Just like, I just want to play dungeons with my friends.
Yeah, can't we all just get along? And what I'd say to that is that, be a good player, and you're playing with your friends, even if the characters don't get along. But they don't necessarily have to not get along to not be rivals. If we take Gimli and Legolas, who kept a constant tally of who'd taken the most orc heads, and that was an entirely friendly rivalry. It was just a way to mark time, and a way to compare each other's martial skills while they work towards a common goal. No harm encouraging something similar in your players. The only reward is who's buying first round at the bar. But that's often enough to generate moments of good, good role playing and honest, good companionship and camaraderie at your table. So, a little inter-party rivalry over something that doesn't necessarily matter that much and is never going to result in Gimli taking his axe to Legolas's neck.
Well, I would hope, yeah.
He'd have to get up there first. Someone would have to throw him. That's one to keep in mind. One to keep in your back pocket when you're GMing and kind of examining how how players interact. Not to mention, it's probably one of the most natural ways to get players to talk to each other in character, because it can be very hard sometimes to get players to interact in that way. But if there's even the hint of a rivalry, you'll never hear the end of it, and neither will the rest of your party. Right. What else do we have to say on this topic?
Well, I had one thing that's popped into my mind, and that was the GM designated rival versus the player chosen rival. Like, the player, either they take some flaw or drawback to say, I have an enemy or a rival, or they have a backstory, which is just this perfect idea for it. I think it's just like, is that meaningfully different from when the GM chooses to have such a rival evolve? Like, if a player writes down, and my brother, who is an adventurer of the same class, but always slightly better than me. Oh, is that a different?
It doesn't hurt. I think what it does is it tells you that player is explicitly looking to have a rival story, and you would be wise to pick up on it, because it gives you, it's a gift to any GM to be asked by a player to give them an antagonist of some sort.
Yeah, and presumably it means you don't have to worry about the party just killing them the first time.
Yeah, well, of course, especially that example, it's their brother. Like, okay, we don't get along, but you can't kill my brother. That is not going to work here. Yeah, that's a really nice way of doing it. You're right. Family compete. Some of the best, most ambitious, and most lauded families are, very, very competitive. You often hear this. So there's no reason. I mean, if a romance between parties between rivals might complicate things, then an actual blood relation is just wonderful. There's lots to be done with that. If the player brings to the table, absolutely run with it.
Yeah.
But if you want to introduce a rival and give them a certain amount of plot armor, or at least a certain ablativeness from the murder hobos, then yes, having them actually be importantly related to one of the players is a very good way of either protecting them or weeding out the complete and utter psychopaths at your table.
Yeah, you have to take care that you don't have like the assassin player goes off screen and just gives them the rival character a bunch of kidney surgery without telling anyone else, and that
surprise kidney surgery.
Yeah, surprise kidney surgery. It's free,
unscheduled and free. Yeah, we'll see if we can line up a donor after. That's a different problem, and I think every GM who's listening to this knows exactly what they're going to do about it. But it's got nothing to do with the rival aspect of the game. So yeah, I think there's tons of good stuff to use there, and the takeaway I think is the tricky part is figuring out how to set them up without getting them immediately killed by your players. Like that's the part that you need to lay out some context. The rivalry has to fit within the context of an organization or common goal or something broader. The thing that makes them rivals rather than out and out opponents.
Yeah, and not all campaigns are going to be appropriate for that. If you are doing that sort of wander between adventures model, then you're probably not going to have enough opportunities or contrivances to have a rival adventuring party just happen to show up at every village that the players stop into to have a Barney about the local dungeon.
Unless you're in an anime.
Unless you're in an anime. But yeah, like you have to place your things. It's just like, and beware that maybe if you're only having so much game time in a given campaign, that maybe you're only going to get 3 or 4 really good scenes with a rival adventuring party. So, it's important to have strong setup for it and to maximize the impact of each time they show up, because otherwise you very easily get into one of those situations where the players go into some giant dungeon level 3 and come out level 7 blinking bleary-eyed, and then we're sort of expected to give the same attention to their old rivals as they did, despite having months of game time pass without any interaction with them. So
yeah, but their old rivals are level 8.
Well,
and they've got a better sword, so nice effort there, losers.
Yeah, but
yes,
it's entirely doable, but it is, you are having to lean into the contrivance of it and making sure that the next time they meet, there's maximal pushing of the thing. So,
I think you sort of fall about the campaign. Presumably, the campaign isn't about the rivalry. It's a side story to the wider, or the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The war that has to be won. Doesn't matter if you're two parties of advanced scouts who are rivals. You still have to win the war. So the rivalry may have to be put aside at some point, which is, a way for the story to evolve. And that's, or they turn to the dark side and turn and become turncoats, in which case the rivalry is now ended. They are now hated opponents. Now you're free to kill them. But there'll be some cracking dialogue during the combat. So I think it's natural for rivalries to evolve, to either be resolved or to dissipate or to go over the top and become out and out conflicts. That's natural, that happens, and any one of those or anything like that can be a great way to use those rivals to bring depth to your game. Well, you know what? It turns out we could get along. My icing, your blood cake, potent combination.
Certainly plates well. But yes, if you have a wonderful story of the time that those rival adventurers, got to that +3 sword first, and you had to spend 7 levels tracking them down and tricking them into some kind of contrived poker game to get it back, please let us know in our Discord or other social media.
Yeah, absolutely. We love to hear from folks. We have a few episodes planned coming up that are rooted in discussions that have been going on in our Discord lately. So be sure to come along and get some background on those, or to suggest your own topics. We're always happy to hear from you.
Or just send us an email at party@theadventuringparty.net.
Or tweet us at the Adventuring
PTY.
At the Adventuring Party, PTY. You'll find it all in the show notes. Anyways, I have been SavageMick.
And I have been Warlord Scarr, greatest blood souffle baker in the land, but I stand with this man and his icing.
You won the regionals. It's not exactly the land. Anyways.
Oh, that's just... we must always have a goal to strive for, and I will get there first.
And until then, this party's over. Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.